Well, Sunday is, of course, race day, and this one should be a bit of a thrill ride. It's race of the season once again, and we'll be heading to Monterey, California, to the legendary Laguna Seca, and obviously taking some Indy cars around there. It should be a little bit of a thrill ride in the 45-minute race that we have ahead of us. My name is Lewis McGladen. Alongside me is John Munro. We do love doing these race of the seasons. We've had a couple of these before. They're always a bit of a thrill ride, and I'm sure today is no different.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, it's an incredible combo. Everyone loves driving the Indy car. It's such a raw, visceral experience. Very, very tricky to get the most out of. And Laguna Seca, well, it's kind of similar, to be honest. There's not much margin for error. Very difficult to overtake. But yeah, race of the season provides so much variety. Every single race is completely different. And I'm sure this one is going to be an absolute corker.
Certainly is, of course. Laguna Seca, one of the newer tracks to enter the platform, of course, in the recent past. Joined in the May 9th Q2 content drop that we had. Waiting, obviously, the next load of content in a few months' time, which will be surely thrilling to add to the collection. But Laguna Seca is it's a brilliant circuit. Obviously came with Brands Hatch and Donington Park. All the drivers have been working through the season to get their way onto this grid through all the qualifiers and such, building up to this moment, to this 45-minute race. As to end the season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all of the hard work comes down to this. Of course, not too much at stake. Drivers are going for glory, they're going for trophies, but there's no championship standings to worry about. So people are going to be very keen to make their way through to the front. This is going to create an incredibly intense and hopefully very exciting race for all of us to watch. It's interesting with Laguna because the touring car also came out along with Donington and Brands Hatch, of course. A lot of people kind of focused on those two, and I feel like Laguna kind of got a little bit put to the side, but thankfully now it's coming out with the Indy car. It's just going to be absolutely incredible.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you. Yeah, like I say, we had the Toyota, we had the Infiniti, then we had Brands Hatch, Donington Park, and everyone was like, "Oh, this stuff's so good." And I was like, "Wait, Laguna Seca also came out as well, did it?" Yes, it did. It certainly did, and it is absolutely fantastic. And of course, before we get to see them in Formula Challenge and Formula Pro and our high echelons of esports racing taken on this circuit, we did get to see a couple of drivers jumping it. Of course, here in Race of the Season, the thing with this system as well, the competition system on rFactor 2, which is open to everyone to take part, not just the esports veterans. It opens it up to the everyday folk in sim racing terms to kind of jump on. Hey, even me and you could take part.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd rather be commentating, to be honest, because I thought it was going to be exciting, but we definitely could be. We're trying to. I know that one of my Traxion colleagues actually was attempting to qualify in the top splits of this one this week. But yeah, anyone can do it, and that's what's so magnificent about it. If you're sat there at home with lots of talent, bags of potential, but you don't quite have the platform to go out and show it, or you're not part of a team, you can jump in the competition system, set an incredible lap time around Laguna, and you could be on broadcast today on TraxionGG racing the Indy car. So yeah, it's a phenomenal platform for people who are looking to make that next step, and I'm sure there'll be some big teams watching.
Yeah, from the very, very competitive in sim racing to those brand new, the rFactor 2 competition system does have plenty for everyone to go and take part in. It's why the last season's been so great. You've got lower level open wheeled stuff, obviously high level open wheeled stuff from what we raced today. You've had touring cars. Soon we'll have the GT3 trophy coming up as well next season, which will be thrilling in itself. You can find out all more on that by visiting all forms of social media and also just checking more on the Traxion YouTube as well. But focusing on today, focusing on the car at hand and focusing on the Dallara IR18, which is a tricky beast in itself. Plenty of downforce on the car, but it's still very, very drivable.
Yeah, it is a very tricky car indeed. It's the latest single-seater to have been added to the rFactor 2 platform. We did see the IndyCar All-Stars event at Indianapolis a few months ago with all the real-life Indy drivers in it, so that was a great introduction to the car. But it's a tricky one to manage because, of course, with this car, it's very easy to lock up. And so you've got to be very careful on the brakes. Lots of downforce, as you say, and red here, it's just incredible.
Yeah, so let's have a look at the Dallara IR18 with a 2.2-litre twin turbo, up to 700 brake horsepower, tiny little rim, nice and plenty rubber-filled tyres to push them around the circuit. And speaking of pushing, push to pass will assist the overtaking from that 500-metre run down towards the end. Beautiful sounds coming out of the new sound model that we had since the Q2 content drop. And of course, plenty of aero models we expect to run the Rover higher down towards package. We've got weight jacket stuff which will affect the more overall, focusing on the Laguna Seca, the medium downforce. That's exactly what they're looking at. A car that is great value for money, and certainly one the drivers have got their money's worth of out of since it's come out a good few months ago now. It came out at the start of the year. Certainly is one that we like to see racing more and more, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. And the nice thing, when you look at IndyCar compared to the likes of Formula One, is the cars are very, very evenly matched. And obviously, you've got one chassis, so it's going to be close across the board. Quite a bit of setup work you can do with these cars. I think we're going to see a lot of drivers running very high downforce setups today at Laguna just to try and keep themselves on the road, because one mistake is going to send you into the wall. Any drivers that go for a lower downforce setting may be hard to overtake, but they're going to have to put their car right near the front in the beginning of the race.
Yeah, the push to pass will add around about 60 brake horsepower, which predominantly we were used on the start-finish straight. Of course, that run for the final corner all the way down through the first kink and then down towards the Andretti hairpin. That's where most of it is going to be used. It's very, very tricky to pass outside of that. Sometimes out of turn 6 up into the infamous corkscrew as well can be a bit of a bold dive. But outside of that, a lot of the corners are too medium speed in their approach.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to be grimacing if there are any big moves heading into the corkscrew. There's been some obviously phenomenal moves in the past that we've seen in real life motorsport going in there. But as you say, a lot of medium speed corners, a lot of very dangerous curbs as well. If you turn in that little bit too early or just misjudge things, you're going to be sent off into the gravel on the outside of the circuit. So it's very tricky to pass. There's going to be lots of following in the middle sector, a case of trying to stay close without picking up too much dirty air. And it's going to be all about whether you can get a move done into the first corner. I think that's going to be a big point. Obviously, we're going to see lots of lunges into the last corner as well. That's always a popular move, maybe some cutbacks. So things get very dicey towards the end and the start of the lap. Through the middle, it's going to be a case of hanging on.
I think also, as much as some people don't like us talking about it, it is almost always the feature in a race like this. A little bit of fuel saving as well, keeping yourself out of the pit lane as much as possible. I'd say over a 45-minute race, you're expecting it to be a one-stop race. 2 stops is a little bit too aggressive, so I don't think we'll be seeing any of that. But in the 45-minute race, one thing that we do know is that qualifying is going to be absolutely critical to get that one right.
Probably the most important qualifying of the race of the season format so far when it comes to these races. And people are going to have to watch out when they're one pit stop as well, because it is a very, very tight pit lane entry and exit. You've got the concrete wall on the way in. It's a really, really tight left-hander, and you're going to see drivers make mistakes in there, Lewis. I'm very confident of that. Same on the exit as well. You've got to slow yourself right down to avoid sliding off and onto the gravel, and then heading, of course, towards the actual circuit at turn 1. So you've got to be very, very careful. The adrenaline's running high, but you're going to have to stay calm. Yeah, and as you say, qualifying very important. Start of the race, absolutely crucial as well.
Yeah, and considering, I mean, you said there to throw back, this is race of the season. To those of you that might be joining it thinking, hang on, what's this new thing? We've done this a couple of times before. At the start of the year, we did, of course, the first ever race of the season, which was at the Daytona International Speedway in the BMW M4 GT3, which was fairly new to the service at that point. Turk Hakkinen taking the victory on that day. Then we've raced the LMP3s around the Nordschleife. So now racing the Dallara IR18 around here at Laguna Seca. 3 very, very different styles of racing. Can't wait to see what is in future, what is in store for us next, because it's the joy of something like this is that there's no format that we have to stick to. You can basically just put whatever you want together and it just works.
Absolutely. I mean, and next time out, we could see some very low-powered cars around, a very wide circuit. Who knows what it's going to be? And that's what's very exciting. Every time we get to a new race of the season event, we don't know what we're going to see. It's going to be a completely different combination. The race could go any direction. But I mean, amazing. The roster of cars and tracks we have available nowadays on rFactor 2 is incredible, and it's getting better and better by the month. So yeah, this is going to be a good one. The cars have been getting faster and faster as we've gone through each of these races, of course. Now going from LMP3 to IndyCar, which is a big step up. Be interesting to see as well how many of the same drivers we're going to see this week as we saw 6 weeks ago when we had the last one.
Well, I'm sure people are bored of hearing us waffle and staring at our faces, because it is time to go racing. The formation lap is underway here at Laguna Seca. And there has already been drama on the start-finish straight. My goodness me, already a little bit in the back running of that. But either way, they are running on the formation lap. We get to see them out on circuit for the first time. This is going to be, like you say, a dicey race. It's our first real view of the circuit, and you can tell it is in absolutely beautiful conditions here in California. We are actually involved in the race. Never mind, we have missed the race start. Ricardo Fava in 3rd position now is attacking for 2nd. Our race leader is checking out at the moment.
Yeah, it looks like Dan Ove Bratholm has taken the lead early on here. Yeah, unfortunately we did miss the start there, but it looks like the top 4 have kind of made a breakaway straight away. So you've got Parsonen in 2nd, you're following Ricardo Fava here in 3rd, and then Pablo Lopez Garcia behind him. And yeah, someone's into the pits.
Yeah, straight, and crashed in the pit lane as well.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what you were speaking of earlier, already receiving an awful lot of retirements right on the start of the race. But you're absolutely right. Daniel Brandtholm leading very comfortably by now 1.2 seconds, courtesy of that issue coming into the pit lane. I did once see Rowan Grosjean doing that in the pace car. Let's try not to remind the poor man of that travesty. But right now, great lead from Brandtholm.
Yeah, absolutely. He's built up a nice gap. He's already broken away from any kind of slipstream. Not that slipstream's important here. It's more about dirty air. And obviously, Lewis, we said in the build-up there would likely be a car hitting that pit wall in entry, and we saw it already at the end of lap 1. But a huge amount of cars in the pits from 6th position backwards. So I wonder if there's been some sort of massive issue here. Maybe a big crash or something on lap 1. Really not sure, but it doesn't look good.
Well, we've already got retirements from Partanen, from Ellis, from Ray, from Carrion, from Malilo, and from Lemoyne. Gudassin is also in the pit lane, having a very slow in-lap. There is Bradley Sellers, departing the pit lane, what is now 6th position. I think you are absolutely right. Considering when we joined the coverage, there was already quite a lot of drama on the start-finish straight. I think we can guarantee ourselves there has been a start-finish crash.
Absolutely. I mean, you saw the debris as soon as we cut to it. I think Ricardo Fava here, I might be wrong, but it looked like he was holding a tiny bit of steering lock on the straight as well, so he might even have damage also. I do wonder, what's going on. I was also thinking it could be some drivers making very early pit stops just to get out of the way, but that's unlikely. So yeah, I mean, it's a dream start for Brandtholm. He's already looking in a great spot for taking home the victory as Ricardo Fava runs wide, just about holds on to it. You can see what we were talking about again there, Lewis, with the gravel and the sand. There's absolutely no margin for error, no runoff, and Fava does seem to have a damaged car.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to tell because it's not directly one hand down. You can kind of see here we're in a straight line and it is going in a straight line. The problem is it does seem as though it's not steering correctly. That's kind of the thing, is that it's almost as if there's a massive dead zone in it, which actually kind of can come from a little bit of contact hitting you in the wrong way. And if you're both steering in both front left and front right, then you might actually have fairly straight steering, but it just feels odd in the corner. It's very hard to describe, but kind of obviously give it a bit of a boaty feel to the car, and that is exactly the issues that Ricardo Fava is probably going to deal with. We have our fair share of driving around in damaged cars, unfortunately, John.
Yeah, as soon as you said that, I can totally relate. A boaty feeling, absolutely perfect. I've never driven a boat myself or sailed a boat. I've been in one, and I can completely relate. It's exactly like that. And around here, that is going to be tricky. I mean, he's got to hang on at least until the first pit stop with that damage. Might even not be repairable. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, it's funny. You just lose all sorts of sense in the middle of the steering rack, and you just lose that extra precision. And around here, with all the curbs on the apexes, big sausage curves you have to avoid, it's going to be so tricky to hold it all together as we go on board now with P4 Paolo Nucci.
Yeah, who is closing in on Lopez Garcia at the moment, and obviously has a decent gap to those behind. Fraser, I don't believe, has been into the pit lane, but we do know that Bradley Sellers definitely has been into the pits. I think Kay has returned to the pit lane. Mercedes already a lap down, and Gudassin, I think, has, as much as it does say pit, I do believe has potentially retired from the race, or might have just rejoined the circuit. Certainly was in the pit lane for a very long time, repairing what seemed to be quite a considerable amount of damage on that number 3.
Yeah, I think he is actually still going. I think it was just a very long stop, judging by the timing here that I've got. But he does, keep going, and he's on for a top 10 still potentially in this race.
Yeah, for sure.
Just with so many issues that drivers are having earlier on. Tim Kay still in the pits. We're going to see him probably as we go past there. There he is at the back of the pit lane. But I mean, these drivers, if you could just stay out of trouble and keep going here, you're going to be on for a pretty good result. Speaking of good results, I mean, the fastest lap of the race has gone to our leader, Danobe Brandtholm, a 1:11.4. On the last lap, it was a 1:12.0, same as Ricardo Fava in second, who managed a 1:12.0 despite the damage that we seem to have on his car there. So looks like the front two have fairly similar pace, 2.5 seconds between them. It's not over yet.
Yes, indeed. Let's see what Fava can do. Fingers crossed. I mean, more so from an entertainment point of view, seeing if Ricardo Fava can actually really close in. It's 2.5 seconds. I suspect that gap at the moment, Brandtholm. I've watched Brandtholm race an awful lot. It is very in control of an open wheeler, particularly. So there's no surprise to see him out front at the moment, but Ricardo Fava can certainly do something about it. We're focused on the battle, though, for third position at the moment, Lopez Garcia and Nucci. You can see there on the tower that you've got there, the alternative tyre, the red tyre, that is the softer compound of the two. And then Fraser, Sellers, Mercedes and Kay, they're all on the white wall, the primary tyre, that one being the harder of the two compounds used, and you can also see all of the push to pass already being used, all of them having plenty of it to use over the entirety of this 45-minute race, adding an extra 50 to 60 brake horsepower, mostly used on that run down towards turn 1, but if not, just for a decent lap time addition.
Yeah, there's barely anywhere you can use it, to be honest, because as soon as you, I mean, look here, for example, there's a little straight, you've got a burst, one gear change, maybe manage a second to push to pass, and then you've instantly got to think about the next apex. And if you've used that push to pass, maybe you're carrying in more speed, so you've got to brake a little bit earlier, and it can mess up your rhythm. So there's not many places you want to use it around here. As you say, it might be worth using just to try and break that general lap time. We've got this fantastic helicopter shot here at Laguna Seca, which of course, still, again, a reminder, new to this rFactor 2 system as of the last couple of months. That looks absolutely phenomenal as Paolo heads towards the Corkscrew. I do think that the guys 5th, 6th and 7th, they're all on the primary harder tyre, probably because they've already been in the pits, so that would make sense. They're now going to try and get to the end on that tyre. Be interesting to see how long it lasts though, Lewis. I don't know if they'll be able to make the full 40 minutes on that tyre, but you know, I definitely think it's possible.
The tyres shouldn't necessarily be an issue to reach the end of the race. They will struggle a little bit towards, you know, obviously the end of the race, don't get me wrong, but it's more so the fuel tank in the IR18 is not exactly massive, and it's why fuel is typically the limiting factor. It's why we tend to see a lot of fuel games being played in a race such as this. We'll see what they can do when it comes to that, and whether they can drag themselves back into the race somehow to their own degree later on in the race, maybe just trying to keep hold of the top 5, or Fraser, who I don't believe has been in the pit lane, because he was a fair way up, but he wasn't far enough off to have sort of made a pit stop about 5 minutes ago, so which is the last time that I saw the gaps there. These two are separated by absolutely nothing, whilst Brantholm is in control at the front. Will ride on board, heading through the fantastic turn 6 and up towards the legendary Corkscrew. And this is the bit where, even in the sim, you hold a breath. Watch this. Boom, it drops away so much fun there when you get the line right.
Absolutely. I mean, if you've ever been on a roller coaster or a water slide that's got a very big drop or something, you've never experienced being in a single-seater race car, I can tell you that elevation changes on a racetrack really do have that kind of seat of your stomach feeling or effect, I should say, as you'd go through them. The drivers in real life will massively feel that as they go through the Corkscrew. Not so much in the sim, but you will feel the car go light, and it becomes very, very difficult to actually control the car on the exit. You can't just give it a boot full of throttle. Quite often you'll see drivers short shifting as soon as they hit the apex at the top of the hill. Grab third gear, don't try and exit in second, because the wheel spin will catch you out. You need to go straight to third and just let the gravity take you down the hill. It's a phenomenal piece of racetrack. We've seen so many iconic moments there through the years. I actually think though the number 5 Paolo might also have a tiny bit of damage. It's hard to tell from the onboard because it looks very similar to Ricardo Fava, so either there's something going on there graphically with both of them looking like they have the same thing, or they both just have a little bit of damage, which even more suggests there's been some sort of major incident here on lap 1.
I'd be surprised if, considering what we saw on the start, considering how many times we've already had, if there were many cars on this grid that are avoiding their fair share of damage in the early stage of the race. And also, by the way, on the undulation thing, you can definitely trust John on that. He's very used to throwing a race car around various race circuits, but also used to do an awful lot of hill climbs, so certainly knows how to change elevation in a very, very swift period. As we look back from Pablo Lopez Garcia, completely under pressure from Nucci at the moment as we come out of the final corner to complete the 10th minute of this race, and yet another lap under our belts. Brantholm and Fava separated by just 3 seconds at the moment. It's gone out by an extra couple of tenths over the last few laps. Lopez Garcia and Nucci for 3rd and 4th. Fraser, Sellers, Mercedes, and then Tilipacano in 8th position with Track and Gudesen the top 10. Tim Kay, who went a lap down on this group just a recent while ago, the 11th and final runner on the grid. Obviously the retirements from Parton, Ellis, Ray, Carrion, Melillo, and then Lemoyne as well. Clearly a very dramatic start to what has been a drama first lap.
Yeah, absolutely. Of all the ones to miss, it's such a shame. But we've got Pauli Parton down there in 12th. I just want to give a shout out. Pauli was 2nd place on the opening lap, so clearly was right up at the front. So it's a shame to see the retirement there for the number 77. But yeah, the guys are still going, are going to make the most of this. They're going to have a good race. Of course, we have trophies up for grabs here, Lewis, so it's not as if it's just an exhibition race here. There's some seriously impressive trophies as well. We've both had our hands on the trophies for the first round, and that was some incredible piece of glassware that Turka Hakkinen finally received in the last couple of days. It's got to be said, after some issues getting it over to him. But yeah, he's very happy with that. So these guys, especially those in the top 4 right now, I think it's pretty much a 4-horse race. Let's be honest. There's almost two pairs already, first and second, and third and fourth. But there's definitely something to fight for here. We've got an overall win on the cards for one of these front 2, and we've got a 3rd place trophy for Lopez Garcia and Nucci as well in 4th. So still plenty up for grabs. Lots of good racing to be had. It's going to be a kind of game of cat and mouse here a little bit though, Lewis, because there's not much pressure from behind. They've got a bit of space around them. They can afford to just sit in behind, learn the lines of their rival in front, not take too many liberties. As I say, they've got that gap. So it's more going to be a case of sussing out your rival and seeing what you can do. Less so, of course, for Fava, because he does have a 3.5 second gap he needs to close.
Yeah, I mean the battles here. It's easy to kind of just rule it down to the top 2. There is possibilities that 3rd and 4th in Lopez Garcia and Nucci will be moving their way back up to the top. It all depends on what the tyre strategy ends up being. For Brantholm and for Fava, they might be pushing their tyres quite hard. Still expect them to potentially do a pit stop during this race. Now, if they are pushing their tyres quite hard and they come in the next sort of 4 or 5 minutes before the halfway point of the race, they might be more inclined to run on the primary tyres in the second half of the race. There is no requirement for them, at least as far as my knowledge, as to which tyres they are forced to run in this aspect. And so in that sense, if you're good enough on your tyres, if you're keeping them in check, there is no reason why you couldn't go for the alternate, for the Red Bull softer tyres, twice in the race. That would certainly be the strategy that I would be leaning towards. Always like to stay on the Red Bull tyres. There is quite a large pace difference between the alternate and the prime. Normally, obviously everyone's used to the world of Formula 1 and stuff where it is like half a second between the two. I'm pretty sure the primaries and the alternates were separated by about 1.5 seconds to even closer to 2 seconds between the two tyres.
Yeah, I think that looks like the case. I mean, just looking at the lap times, the leaders, they're in the mid-12s right now, fastest laps in the 11s. They're on the softer alternate tyre. Then you've got 3rd and 4th place cars, a little bit off the pace, doing 13s at the moment, also on the alternate tyre. But then the 5th, 6th and 7th, so Jonathan Fraser, Bradley Sellers and Savros Mudasidis, they are all on the harder tyres. They're lapping a little bit slower at the moment, so you've got 15s, 14s. There is, to be fair, 13 in there somewhere, but generally speaking, you can see that gap, maybe 1.5 seconds a lap, so you're absolutely spot on there. Must say though, Jeroen Gudesen in 10th position, he's doing a really good job at the moment. Fastest laps are 1:11.7. He's in a 1:12.0, so he has actually got the pace to be up in the front of this race, with the front 2. So it's a real shame he's down in 7th, 2 laps down, but he'll still be able to put in some stonking laps.
That's just how it goes in race like this. I mean, we've had our fair share of that in our sim racing career, John, where we've had races where we've definitely had the pace, and for whatever reason, it gets away from you, for want of a better term. But that's just how it is. You've got to kind of just keep your head down. You can see that Gudesen is closing in on track, so at least there is plenty more positions to be gained. Yellow flags out in sector 3, as I believe it might be the likes of potentially Tim Kay that's had a bit of an issue in that sector. It certainly isn't. It's Jonathan Fraser who's had a go at the penultimate corner.
Yeah, he seems to have kept on going, so he didn't make a dive for the pits or anything, so hopefully not picking up damage, maybe just a spin. There's this corner here, the downhill left-hander, so much elevation change still happening there. If you dip a wheel on the right at the wrong moment, you can easily spin off. Same with this right-hander as well. There's a big sausage curb on the inside. The camber helps you through that one, but it's very easy to have a spin in any of these corners, and it almost looked as if Fraser was recovering from some sort of off-track excursion, so quite possibly something happening there. He's on, by the way, Lewis, for another good result, because we saw Jonathan Fraser doing a great job at Nürburgring, I believe, in the LMP3 last time out, so he's looking really, really solid in terms of picking up another strong result.
Yeah, that's kind of how it is with these. We see a large grid of different names in each round when we go racing for the race of the season. It's kind of the point of it, it's drivers that seem to prefer this car or want to race this car. This is the opportunity for them to do so, but we don't typically see the same grid all the time. We see the same 3 or 4 drivers that will do race the season. The first one at Daytona, then they'll do the Nürburgring, and they'll do this. Maybe they're not looking for the highest level of esports. That's the entire point of an event like this. It's not designed to be the highest level of esport. It's designed to be, again, the backing from the community and stuff, and the competitive side of sim racing. As there is Jonathan Fraser going a lap down in 5th position on Danolf Brantholm. And Brantholm did lose a little bit of time. You can kind of see there, just looming in the background, coming down the hill, beats Fava and is really, really closing in.
Yeah, that made a big difference there. Brantholm 13.6, Fava 12.4, so 1.2 seconds quicker on that lap was Ricardo Fava. Obviously the back marker maybe making a slight difference, but I don't think it was enough to make 1.2 seconds. So yeah, Fava having a good one, Brantholm having a bit of some sort of issue on that lap a little bit. Gap is now around about 2 seconds just underneath, so yeah, he's definitely still in play here. We've still got the front two battling away, and to be honest, there's still a long way to go. There are of course still pit stops. A lot of things can change. You know, we've seen drivers crashing into the wall on pit lane entry. We talked about how tricky the exit can be. You know, it's not easy at all. So 2 seconds is nothing essentially when it gets to that kind of point with the strategies. We see Fava locking up the brakes, snatching the front left into the corkscrew and having to take to the curbs on the inside. Probably got a track limits warning there, I've got to say, Lewis, if he gained a little bit of advantage. So you can't afford to do that too many times, or we could be seeing a trip to the pits.
Did think Brantholm, by the way, not this incident that's dropped him back, but it was a bit of a lock-up from Brantholm coming down into the Andretti hairpin. What is essentially the second corner, and don't get me wrong, I'm not going to go on the largest rant about track numbers around American circuits, but this, as much as it is the first real braking zone, it's the first real corner of the circuit, it's technically turn 2. The Andretti hairpins, we head back to Paolo Nucci. There was a yellow flag out, and there is quite a close battle between Goodison and Track as well in 9th spot, which was where we were kind of thinking that Goodison was going to be making a bit more progress courtesy of having better speed than where previously, well, where his position is really.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was just going to say. He's flying at the moment in P10, still doing 112, so still on lead pace is Goodison here. So we've seen him close up on Tom Track, who's a little bit off the lead pace, it has to be said, maybe still carrying a little bit of damage, but we're going to see a move here very soon. He does go for it into the last corner, and that is a nice, clean, successful move. No fight back from Tom Track, it's got to be said. He knows the pace difference is there, he's let him have it, and that is 9th position. So we'll keep an eye on this because, Jeroen could still find himself in a very good position come the end of this race. He's showing phenomenal pace and skill. It's just, he's just got too many big gaps to try and close. It's 70 seconds now to P8, so he's going to have to do a lot of work. But, it's not out of the question as he gets a bit squirrely there coming out of the first hairpin. Very, easy to do in these cars with so much power. I was going to actually ask you, Liz, we were talking about it earlier. When you're maybe 2 laps down, you've not really got much to play for. The pressure's off as a driver. Do you find it easier on a personal level to go faster and more consistent when the pressure's off but there's nothing to fight for? Or do you find it easier when the pressure's on and you've got everything to lose? Because for me, it can depend on the different races, but I find it very tricky to be really, really fast when you've got nothing on the plate.
Depends on the car, I think, because what I mean by that is it depends on how comfortable you are in the car. Actually this is kind of me assuming more for you, but I think we've got the same kind of background in sim racing. We're both sort of touring car racing. I know you've obviously done your fair share. Don't be too offended, John. Don't be too offended. We're both fairly touring car race. In a touring car, the more pressure, the faster I go. Absolutely. If I've got someone right on the rear end, you just tend to find that extra little bit of speed. In a car like this, I would probably say I'd go considerably faster, basically just away from everyone, just in my own little spot, no real pressure, because it is a tricky car to drive. It's so easy when you're under a lot of pressure to use a little bit too much of the loud pedal, to use a little bit too much of the brake, to steer more than you need to overcorrect for slides, to potentially not use enough of any of it. And that's kind of like the difference. Depends on how comfortable you are in the car. And it's why a lot of drivers and teams at the top end of sim racing, they put in so much practice so they can get comfortable with the car, so they are one with the car, so that when it does snap in an odd way, they're normally there and ready to catch it rather than being shocked by what's just happened in an unknown environment. What do you find?
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it, actually. Because I think there's when you're up to pace with a car and you're really on it, there's different ways where you can go beyond what's possible. So sometimes if a car's quite safe, overdriving it will just cause a bit of understeer, or you lose a bit of time and miss an apex. Whereas some cars are very much on the edge, so if you make a mistake, you actually go off or have oversteer or spin off. So some cars you're fighting to try and stay on the track, whereas others you're just fighting to not lose time. And I think that can also have a big impact. If you're not focusing fully, if you're not under so much pressure in like a car that's really on edge, it's not so bad because you can kind of get away with it and you can just relax into it. Whereas if you're really tense, it's a lot easier to have an off. Whereas when you're driving something, as you say, like a touring car or a Clio or something like that, which I used to love racing, I know you did as well.
Yeah, you're right.
With those things, if you start making mistakes, it tends to be just understeering and stuff like that. So when you're under pressure, you can still focus and hit your apexes, and you're not really, risking losing the car in the same kind of way. It's more just losing a little bit of time. So yeah, I think I have to say something similar. By the way, we have had a DNF. Tilibacano in 8th position. Janino, he's gone off, or DNF. I mean, his fastest lap was a 12.9, so his pace wasn't bad, but clearly not managing to make it to the end. And that is going to be another position for Jeroen Gudesen, who's now up to P8 as we go back on board with Paolo Nucci in 4th.
Yeah, 7 retirements then from the race so far in the form of Tilla Bacano, then Poi Partonen, LS Ray, Carrion, Melillo and Lemoyne, all retirements from this race. But the race is still certainly on, at least for the top 4, because Brandholm has a lot of pressure from Ricardo Fava behind. Lopez Garcia and Nucci very, very close on the circuit, riding on board with Paolo Nucci, who just misses the apex coming through the 5th corner up towards turn 6, which is a corner which is a very much love-hate for a lot of drivers. I love it. Ricardo Fava into the pit lane and not making a mess of it, so does actually manage to hook the apex and not drive straight into the wall as we saw a little bit earlier on.
That's quite a good way of taking the pit lane entry, to be honest. You know, just hook that
super
curve
tight
to the point where it literally bounces you around the corner and keeps you far away from the wall. That's a very quick stop for Ricardo Fava, Lewis. I don't know if he changed tyres, 6.7 seconds. I mean, the IndyCar might have very quick pit stops, you know, because they do in real life. It's a sprint series, not an endurance series. You know, you can have quick stops, but that is surprisingly quick. I wonder now if we'll see a reaction from Brandholm. So this is a key point for the race win here, and Fava's done his job well. He's got it in well. And you can see there on the left, he is the first member of the top 5 to make that pit stop. So this next lap is going to be absolutely crucial.
And comes out in crucial in 2nd place as well, not too far ahead of Lopez Garcia and Nucci. But you're absolutely right. A single pit stop made from Fava, also pit stops made from Sellers, Mercedes, Gudesen, Track, and then 2 from K. But that was a very, very fast stop. I actually think might have been all right. Maybe he had overfueled the car in the early stages, so he was just really waiting for the tyres. And obviously Daniel Brandholm driving straight into the pit lane, pulls it down. You can see the pit lane speed is very early. It's where those red markers are. Already Gudesen in the pit lane, also in the bright yellow machine. And so it's kind of every time I'm seeing the team and stuff like Maya Shank and stuff, I'm always kind of like, yeah, it's a Maya Shank car. It is a Maya Shank car, but obviously not actually driving for Maya Shank in real life, so it's kind of an irrelevant point. Ricardo Fava coming to the final corner now.
Yeah, Brandholm's pit stop time was identical to the 10th of a second, 6.7. So clearly that was, you know, the same kind of stop. Probably took on exactly the same fuel and tyres. And we see Brandholm accelerating away. He had a good pit lane entry as well, slightly more orthodox, although he did lock up a bit on the way in. Not that you're going to need those tyres anymore. He's going to come out the pits, and it's going to be pretty much as you were for the front 2. Great job by both, it has to be said. There wasn't really that shift that I expected might happen one way or the other. As we see Fava getting very close again, that's lapping Fraser. And yeah, I think Fava was just a little bit impatient, maybe a bit indecisive on making it through. Fraser was just holding his line. And yeah, Fava got a bit locked up, lost the back end on the downshift, and did well, to be fair, to actually keep it pointing in the right direction.
I don't necessarily blame him for being a little bit aggressive there. Can see the race leader just fresh out of the pit lane and wants to apply the pressure immediately, and had maybe not lost that half second there, would really have been right up there with Brandholm. So he's lost out a little bit of time, and there loses out even more. Just a little bit of a lock-up. Seemed like it was a bit of rear locking coming into the corkscrew, which is very easy to do because it's not a flat run into it. It starts to drop off as you want to get on the brakes. You've kind of got a bit of undulation there. Track's dropping away a little bit more on the left than it is on the right. It's an awkward braking zone.
Yeah, absolutely. As we see Nucci into the pits, he's got that damage. So he gets slowed down very early just to be safe. And you can see locking up those tyres. But he had a bit of left hand down going on there, so hopefully that'll try and fix it. But yeah, you know, we're seeing a lot of lockups in the braking zones. I was speaking to a Traxion colleague and good friend of mine, and yours, of course, Ross McGregor, who was actually doing quite a lot of laps of this as well. He would have been in this top split race tonight, but unfortunately had other commitments. But he was basically saying this car is so tricky when it comes to the actual braking zones. It's very, very easy to lock up. And you can imagine around Laguna, with all the different loads and you know, the different corner types of braking zones, undulation, very, very tricky indeed to try and keep this car stable. So I'm not surprised that when these guys are really pushing the boundaries, actually, sorry, I've just noticed, only half a second from the lead too. So something has maybe happened there to Brandholm, because that gap's coming right down.
I don't feel Brandholm has the pace. Maybe there was a little bit too much cut. There was a little bit too much taken as well when it came into the closing speed from Ricardo Fava into turn 6. So he's overcooking it ever so slightly. You can kind of see keeping himself way off of the apexes at the moment is Ricardo Fava. I think one of these cars is overdriving it and one of them is underdriving. I think Brandholm is underdriving the car at the moment to keep the tyres in a comfortable operating window. Uses a bit of push to pass there on the start-finish straight as we head back down the hill. Riccardo Fava is charging, and by the way, the stop from Paolo Nucci was incredibly long. It was over 20 seconds, so I'm kind of doubtful that he's going to be playing a part in that battle for the podium post-pit stop.
Lap times, by the way, Lewis, 1:11.438 for Brandholm, 1:11.434 for Fava, so nothing in it on that lap. That was Fava's fastest lap of the race, Brandholm's fastest lap of the race, a whopping 0.05 of a second quicker. These guys are absolutely on the limit of their own pace, it's got to be said. You can tell in the lap times, you know, they're really, really pushing. Obviously, new tyres on. Oh, and you can see just how much curb that Fava's using there as we go on board now, heading towards the Corkscrew. Will we see a lock-up from either of the two? Under braking, Fava super late on the brakes, gets it turned in over the curb, down the Corkscrew, quick shift of the gears, and then this corner's almost flat. You want a little lift to keep the car in. Back on the power, just watch out for that gravel on the exit. Straight over to the left, hook it through the fast right-hander, lots of camber there, straight back over to the right. It's a roller coaster that never stops. Hard on the brakes for the last corner, keep it straight, get it in on the apex, which is far harder than it looks, and bang on the power as you head down towards the first hairpin. There's no time to breathe around here, absolutely none at all.
No, absolutely not. I mean, that was super stuff. We can kind of get the vibe as well as you ride on board with essentially the nose cam of Riccardo Fava, is how much more of the circuit that Fava is comfortable with using than Brandholm at the moment. I mean, kind of got that vibe going down to turn one as well. Could pull it all the way over to the right-hand side. Brandholm is keeping it well within the white lines, both left and right, on most of the occasions. Isn't using it in the braking zones. Meanwhile, Fava, you can see even here, coming into turn 5, uses a little bit of that curb on the right-hand side, uses it on the exit as well. You'll see it up here as well. They'll both use a little bit of the curb on the turning point on the right-hand side. But Fava's driving maybe a little bit overly aggressively, using it too much. It's going to be overheating those tyres, which is fine for a couple of laps, for 5 minutes maybe of this stint, but in that final 10-15, that is where Brandholm's calmness at this point is going to pay dividends.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, you can see it with Fava. He's either using all of the track, or he's getting oversteer, or he's missing the apex. There's nothing in between. He's either perfect or not, or far from it, I should say. Whereas Brandholm is just keeping it within the lines, could use a bit more everywhere, but not really making as many mistakes. Their last lap times, a 1:10.9 for Fava, 1:11.0 for Brandholm, who now does a 1:10.9, so response from Brandholm. These guys knocking another half second off the fastest laps, but they're not separated by more than a tenth a lap. Like, it's incredibly close between the two of them. And I mean, this pace is very hot. You know, we saw 09s in the hot lap qualifying to get into this race. We saw 8s, I believe, as well. From some of them. So I mean, doing 10s in the race with obviously the fuel for 16 minutes left and a couple of lap old tyres, it's good pace for the two of them, has to be said.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're absolutely spot on there. It's kind of what you expect from drivers that are as good as these to just sort of find their way onto the limit, as we can see Riccardo Fava heading up towards the Corkscrew once again. Just see how much more of the curb on the right hand side he uses. They're balancing it over the brakes, wrestling it down the hill. 1 second separating Brandholm and Fava at the top of our field. The gap between Nucci and Lopez Garcia has gone out to around 10 seconds, courtesy of that much longer stop from Nucci, obviously repairing some of that damage. I mean, you said before coming into the pit lane was tracking slightly down one hand through the corner. Riccardo Fava makes a complete meal of the final one.
Yeah, that final corner has actually changed a lot over the years. You know, 20 years ago, it was a very, very different corner. But they used to use all of the track all the way up to the wall, and Fava seems to be taking the late 90s line through that last corner.
Yeah, right.
Far over the curb. Probably got a warning for it, but it looks like the lap time's actually come through. Fava did lose 4 tenths on that lap, so maybe overheating his tyres. Of course, he was in the dirty air as well, Lewis, so that could be affecting things well. Maybe overheating the tyres because of that too, as we're now on board with Sellers. Beautifully hits the apex there, didn't quite carry the speed out to the outside. He's not going to have a look into the last corner, he's just going to get as close as he dares, perfectly on the curb, get the wheel straightened as quick as possible. He does that, he's going to have the slipstream. We're going to see push to pass from both of them. It's Jonathan Fraser, by the way, in the number 3 that's defending. Bradley's going to go to the outside, he actually had to lift a little bit there, he's going to dive to the inside, make that move. Textbook stuff from Bradley Sellers, and he gets it slowed down. That was a fantastic move.
Absolutely super stuff from Sellers. Obviously on the alternate tyres, taking on Fraser, who is presently on those primaries. The alternates being the softer of the two compounds. That was absolutely super from Sellers. Just kind of played his part in that battle very, very well. It was not just about a big send, it's about using his mind in the move as well, thinking a couple of corners ahead. could have maybe made, well, to be fair, could have absolutely have made a send down the final corner, but decided not to, because what's the point? As they're just passing a little bit of elapsed traffic. They're working their way through the first sector. I believe that's track, just getting out of the way of our race leaders, Brantholm and Faber.
Yeah, I saw the pink there and panicked for a second, thinking it was Brantholm, but no, it was a back marker, so the two of them soldier on. But yeah, you know, as you were saying, just coming back to that move there, he could have made the move into the last corner. He didn't. He got as close as he dared, managed to get the exit on the push to pass, and it showed the effect of the slipstream as well, because they were both on push to pass. As we see, oh, that is commitment through there from Faber. He's chucking the car in. It's not going to be doing his tyres any good, it's got to be said, but really on the edge. But yeah, Fraser as well with his defence. You can see him kind of make an attempt to try and hold the position, and Sellers had to lift a little bit, but he didn't do anything drastic. The pace difference just slightly too high between the two of them. Fraser, you know, running just over a second off the pace, but happy to still be sitting inside the top 7, so he's just looking to make it to the end now.
And Sellers will probably be closing in on Mercedes as well at the moment in 5th position, right? I think based on what I'm seeing on the timings, they're both closing into a certain degree on number 27 that is hanging on to the final position inside the top 5.
Yeah, 2 seconds quicker on that last lap was Sellers than Stavros ahead of him. So yeah, looking very close indeed. The lead battle again, just under a second, just over a second. If DRS was a thing, Ricciardo would be desperately scrabbling to get that last few tenths to get inside it. He misses the apex through turn 2. So easy to do, you know, very, very tricky with the reference points to get that one. This one is a commitment corner, and again, getting as close as possible to that curve on the inside. He's lost that time again, though. He's 2.2 now behind, so that really has cost him. Just a quick shout out while there's a bit of breathing space between these two. You know, we've talked about the pace of your own Goodison down in 8th position. He's banged in a 1:10.1, which makes him the fastest man, or the fastest lap of the race he now has, by a whopping 8 tenths from the league 2. So it's definitely a case of what could have been for him.
Massive speed at the moment from Goodison, but that's how those days go. You know, sometimes it's your day to shine at the top, and sometimes it just isn't. We know some of the drivers are putting quite a bit of work to get onto the grid and to work their way into a decent spot to obviously join us here in the broadcast, but that's just how it goes sometimes. Unfortunately, you always want to put on a bit of a show, and then sometimes it just doesn't work. Nucci, though, putting on a great show right now, because it's close. That gap between Nucci and Lopez Garcia was 9 seconds the last time we saw it, and it has now come down to just the 2. And also, Sellers, you were saying, closing down on Mercedes by a couple of seconds a lap. He's basically knocking at the door as well, 1.5 seconds back. So we've essentially got 3 battles on the grid. The one between Brantholm and Faber for the race lead, the one between Lopez Garcia and Nucci for 3rd, and then the one that will be between Mercedes and Sellers for that 5th position.
Yeah, we saw the gap literally go from 1 second between Brantholm and Faber, this is, to 2.2 in the space of 3 corners. And we were on board with Faber while it happened. You can see it was just that scrappiness, but he's already clawed back another half second. So you cannot say it's over until the last few laps. But yeah, Nucci a second and a half quicker on that one than Garcia. Sellers continuing to outpace. Oh yeah, that's exactly what it is. Yeah, Sellers 11.8, but he's not going to have to make that move on circuit because Mercedes is, as you say, back in the pit, so he's going to drop to 7. But again, he's got a long space ahead of him. Sorry, he's got a long space behind him before he drops to 8, so that should be safe for him. But that ends that battle. Just 2 battles left now, and this is the closest one on circuit at the moment. You can see the difference in confidence and pace right now between Nucci in 4th, who you're looking at, and Garcia, who you're looking from. And it's just going to be a matter of time, I think, Lewis. 1.5 seconds difference. I mean, it's hard to pass around here, but you know, where do you think it's going to happen? Into turn 1?
I mean, turn 1's the down to the Andretti hairpins, the normally the wise one. I kind of feel though that sometimes it might be down into that final corner, especially if you've got a good kick off, you've got good grip in the rear of the car. By the way, speaking of other moves that might happen, Mercedes might close in on Fraser later on the race. There is the move. Lopez Garcia pulls over to one side by side, heading down into the corkscrew. And Paolo Nucci manages to take over 3rd position. Gotta say, Lopez Garcia seemed to allow that to happen. Let's be honest, wasn't particularly fast coming out of 6.
Yeah, I don't know. He didn't use push to pass, and now Nucci did. So that's definitely where the pace difference came. But as you say, the exit from the corner before wasn't too different. I do wonder though, was he trying to defend the inside there, or was he letting Nucci go in a safe way? I think he might have been trying to defend the inside, but Nucci was just so confident on the brakes, he managed to get it stopped. Very, very hard to tell. But there's not going to be a fight back into turn 1 from Lopez Garcia. I think that's probably going to spell the end of that battle as we see yellow flags in sector 3. But yeah, I think that's the move done. I think Garcia's going to have to just wait now and hope that there's a mistake from the man in front.
Mercedes back in the pit lane to serve more. Might have actually, I wonder, been a drive-through penalty that dragged him off, because we've not seen I haven't seen it. Normally tells you on the tower. It doesn't normally pop up on the tower at the top, which we certainly haven't seen for track limit infringements. K also in the pit lane. It is one of the circuits where we are potentially expecting to see some of the odd track limit excursions, obviously particularly through the Corkscrew. You can typically get one on the exit of the corner here. It isn't impossible to get a track limit violation. Final corner, I mean, that one that we saw from Ricardo Fava, I can almost guarantee was a track limit violation, because they do tend to ping you on the exit of corners, and that there from Danolf Brandholm is probably quite close to it as well.
I'll let you know when he crosses the line whether or not that lap's valid or not, but he's definitely increased that gap. We're now looking at 3.2 seconds, so more potential issues from Fava, because Fava does seem to have the edge on outright pace, although the gap now back down to 1.8, so maybe it's just our timing. Let's not get carried away. No, Fava's in the pits.
Fava is in the pit lane.
Is this going to be, Lewis, a drive-through penalty for track limits? I wouldn't be that surprised, but let's wait and see if he stops or not.
Yeah, I think Fava's pit box was quite early, and it is just a straight up drive-through from Ricardo Fava. No stop made. So that will be for track limit excursions for Ricardo Fava, that has essentially ruled out his chance of taking on Danolf Brandholm for the race lead with 8 minutes left to go. But it doesn't mean that Brandholm can't get one.
No, absolutely, but that's the benefit, of course, of having that space behind you. You know, these guys have so much pace that he can come in, drive through penalty. Normally that would be a race, you know, pretty much ruined in a 45-minute race at this level. But because of the issues we've had early on in this race and the gaps that have been created because of that, he's able to come in, serve a drive-through, and he's still looking good for a trophy. It does, however, end our fight for the lead, unless, as you say, Brandholm has issues of his own. But I could see Brandholm now just chilling out a little bit, taking a breather. Saying that, Lewis, he did get a track limits ping for the Corkscrew. I'm seeing now on my timing screen. So, you know, he's gonna have one eye on the limits. That's for sure. It's so easy, as you say, to just push it that little bit too hard. You know, one of the corners we were talking about, that left-hander before the Corkscrew. I don't know the name of it, unfortunately, but it's kind of it's a dip down. You know, it's on camber. You fire the car in at high speed, and it's all about precision. If you get it slightly wrong, either turning too early or too late, you know, you're gonna go off on the outside, because you're either gonna run wide and miss that hook from the camber, or you're gonna hit the curb on the inside, which is gonna bounce you to the outside. And at that point, not only is it a track limits violation, but it's very easy to get your tyres caught on the gravel on the right as well. So this corner we're coming up to now is the one I'm talking about, by the way. Here you go, fires it in. It's so easy to get it wrong. That green AstroTurf on the outside, or the green concrete strip I should say, has saved many cars from meeting with the barrier.
Well, Lopez Garcia and Nucci separated by absolutely nothing. 1.5 seconds between the two of them on the final spot for the podium. There was a car going slow there. That is Tom Track. He'll be trying to get back to the pit lane with a lack of front wing on his car at the moment. Brandholm, with it being 6 minutes left to go, even if it's on the final warning right now, as Tom Track does drag it into the pit lane, this is kind of one of the things, I don't know how much you did this when racing, is that I would always weigh it up. Late on in the race, you've got, like, say 10 minutes left to go, or in this case 6 minutes left to go, and 16 seconds is your lead. I'm then working out how much slower I could go, right, to the point of, like, how much faster would he have to go to catch me? And you're like, they'd have to probably go about 3 seconds a lap faster, which means you can underdrive this car by a second a lap. And a second is a lot to underdrive the car. You can underdrive it a second lap, make it perfectly safe at the riskiest point of the track, and you're still going to win by a very comfortable margin. And that's what will be going through my head right now, is there's just no need to take the risk.
Oh, 100%. I mean, you know, we've talked before in these broadcasts. You know, I love a good strategy. I love a bit of, you know, problem solving during the races. I'm a bit sad like that, but yeah, I 100% look at that. You know, especially if the car behind is faster, which in this case it's probably the case in this to a degree with Fava. But you know, I am constantly calculating as I cross the line. You know, okay, I've got a 10-second gap. Are they a second a lap faster? Are they 2 seconds a lap faster? How many minutes do they need to catch me at this rate? And I do these calculations all the time, especially on the ACC and the longer form races. If I've got half an hour left, 35 minutes, and maybe there's a car 10 seconds behind, I am constantly adjusting my brain to how many tenths can I afford to lose per lap as I go, and then that obviously that number is just a constant moving thing, so you're readjusting all the time, and it really helps if you have the capacity to do that when you're driving. It gives you that little bit of a comfort cushion. You don't need to push that last few tenths, which can make all the difference. And as you say, underdriving in the most dangerous sections can be really, really important and really, really helpful, and it just takes any kind of pressure off as well. So I think Brandholm will be chilling out. He's on a 112.5 in the last lap, so he's not slowed down much, it has to be said. Fava 112.7. So yeah, still giving it some, but a couple of seconds off his fastest lap.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of one of those things that when you're in the rhythm, one of the things that I was taught very early in the sim racing career was if you're in the rhythm, stay in the rhythm. Don't try and slow yourself down, because when you slow yourself down, then you end up you throw yourself out of the rhythm. If you're just comfortable throwing this car around, and you know that even if it's on a knife's edge, if you're just hitting the apexes all the time and you're feeling very comfortable in the car, then just keep doing what you're doing. But accept the risk you're taking. You know, it's so easy around here to, you're absolutely right, turning a little bit too early into turn 6 and take some of that sausage curve, which there is a lot of corners where there is a large sausage curve on the inside, and it will throw you off. And the thing is that dirt on the exit of the corner, the dust, it's not exactly grippy, shall we say, and you will find yourself booking a ticket to the barrier, which wouldn't be particularly fun with 3.5 minutes left to go in this race.
Yeah, not even the current airport delays will stop that from happening. I'm afraid you will definitely, that ticket will be accepted and you will end up in the wall for sure. Yes, not much grip, and that's the thing. It can so quickly go wrong, especially in cars like this. You know, when you're carrying a lot of speed anyway, you're relying on downforce, which is obviously all to do with the air traveling over the car. So the faster you're going, the more downforce you have. If things go wrong, you know, and you can't quite get the grip, you can't quite carry the speed, or you missed your line or something, it doesn't take much for it to throw you way off course, you know, whether that's losing the grip or just understeering off and running out of margin. And at that point, you're just a passenger, and you're traveling so much speed anyway, you're carrying so much speed anyway, I should say, that, you know, you can't stop. There's just no way you're going to stop before you hit the barrier. So precision is absolutely key on a track like this, and especially in IndyCar.
Could really get a look there as to how much the wheels are moving around all the time. And the thing is every time it's moving up and down, you're feeling that in the wheel. All these wheels and stuff. Everyone on the grid is going to be racing with force feedback, some with direct drive, some with fan belts, some with gear-driven direct drives, but everyone's going to be feeling those bumps to their own degree, and they can be, you know, that's what allows you to kind of commit so hard. As much as it's moving around, you think, that's crazy, how do they keep it on the road? Well, that's what the information's being passed on to them, is what's keeping them on the very limit. Daniel Branton, by the way, is starting the penultimate lap of the race, but you know, you've always kind of seen it when the car wheels going left and right. These cars do take quite a lot of work, so you're kind of wheeling it into the corner, and they do wobble a little bit. You're catching it constantly. When you've got force in it just tells you basically where to go, where your hands need to be to keep this car going in a straight line.
Yeah, in some ways it does the work for you. You know, it doesn't just tell you where to be, it actually puts you there, you know, with the forces coming through the wheel. So a lot of the times you see these drivers making big saves, and they seem to know exactly where they need the steering wheel to be pointing in order to avoid the crash. But actually, that's just the steering rack doing its job. That's the force feedback doing its job perfectly, because of course, wheels traveling in a forward motion always want to be facing directly forwards, right? So as you're sideways, the forces through the steering wheel are always going to be trying to point your wheels in the right direction, and that's where, you know, the top equipment can really make a big difference. But yeah, none of it's easy, let's put it that way.
Where is Branton at the moment? Has he just gone to the start finish straight?
That is a very good question. I do not know. He's got 1 minute and 12 seconds to go. Not quite sure whereabouts on circuit he is. There he is. Yes, you're right. He is heading into Andretti hairpin. And his father
had a problem. You know, well, he had the drive through penalty, didn't he? Earlier
yeah,
on,
that gap's definitely gone up.
Yeah, it was around 15 seconds. I don't think Ricardo Calver's particularly pressing on right now. With 1 minute left to go in this race, I think Branton could make this the final lap of the race, but I think it is going to be incredibly close with the run. It is quite late on that start finish straight though, so who knows?
Yeah, it's going to be touch and go, as you say, whether it's going to cross the line in time or not. He's still using the track there, but it's been a really good drive from Branton, you have to say. He's not necessarily been the outright fastest man out there, but maybe that's through choice. You know, he's being careful, he's looking after his tyres. Awesome camera from the bottom of Corkscrew. You can just see how stiffly set up these Indy cars are. Wonderful to see. But Branton, it's been controlled, it's been steady. He's dealt with any pressure from Ricardo Fava behind, and he is going to take home victory on our 3rd ever finale to Race of the Season.
Let's see, out of the final corner with 10 seconds left to go. We'll count him down to the line. Obviously has a little bit of kick of oversteer off the corner. And is he going to slow down to make it the final lap of the race? I think the answer is no. We are definitely getting one more lap here in Race of the Season. And Daniel Branton keeping well in control. Like I say, when you're in control like this, you want to lead as many laps as you can.
Yeah, he was sliding through the last corner there. I really thought he was going to, you know, he was celebrating the win. We've seen an accident there. Someone's binned it. That
was Lopez Garcia. Lopez Garcia, fourth place.
Yeah, he was pushing for that third place 2.5 second gap to close, didn't manage it, and he's now got no front wing, sorry. So if he can get out of that wall, he should still be okay for fourth from Sellers, but it's not a given that he's going to hang on to it, so he's got to be careful. But yeah, let's hope that Brantholm has enough fuel, though, because he will definitely regret that if he doesn't.
I do love seeing them come over the top here. I cannot wait to come racing around here in the season finale of both Formula Pro and Formula Challenge. It'll be a fantastic thrill ride on that day, but that day is a good few weeks away. Another bit of a moment there from Daniel Brantholm coming into the final section, just trying to have a little bit of showboating. One more corner to go, and Daniel Brantholm has completely dominated race of the season. When it comes to his laps led, he is the man on top, and Brantholm leads the final one to take victory here at Laguna Seca. Riccardo Fava will come home 30, count them, 30 seconds back. Absolute madness. Then Paolo Nucci will come across the line. The top three, the only three that remain on the lead lap. On a day like this, that is impressive.
Absolutely. Hudesen in the pits again in 7th position. Brantholm, a braver man than me. You know, I would not be sliding this car around on this track. Maybe if I'm in an MX-5 or in Silverstone, I could get a little bit drifting in the last lap, but not in an IndyCar around Laguna. And the front wingless Lopez Garcia comes through, pulls straight off after the checkered flag to finish P4. P4 without a front wing, not a bad job at all. Clearly trying his hardest to get up to 3rd. And we see now Nucci coming round. Of course, he is actually the last car on the lead lap then, to finish in 3rd position, as you were saying before. And yeah, it's been a great drive from Nucci as well, it's got to be said. He had damage at the start. He's going to take home one of these beautiful Race of the Season trophies. And yeah, it's a good day in the office for him. Obviously avoided a lot of the drama going on around him.
I can't remember if it was yourself or one of your other teammates, but certainly another one of your old teammates. I do remember, this is the bravery of showboating. Toby Davis, one time was showboating.
Oh, I remember.
Yes, yeah, Troy Rivera. Yeah, I know you do.
I was in that race.
Was showboating ahead of everyone on the grid on the final lap of the race, and decided it was a good idea to accidentally overdrive it and throw it into the barrier. It's so easy to do, and it's why that kind of showboating, it takes bravery to do. Does also take quite a comfortable lead to do, which is exactly what Brantholm had. What a dominant race.
Oh yeah, I mean, controlled. It got a little bit dicey at one point. It got very, very close between the front two, and you looked like Fava, to be honest, did have the pace, although Fava was carrying a little bit of damage from the start. But yeah, textbook drive, controlled it in the end, and obviously won with a big gap when it came to the final result. So well done, Brantholm, fully deserved.
Certainly is. Daniel Brantholm taking victory ahead of Riccardo Fava, Paolo Nucci on your podium. They'll be receiving the trophies and such. Pablo Lopez Garcia across the line without a front wing with Bradley Sellers behind. Jonathan Fraser and Gudesen, who was in the pit lane quite a few times late on in that race, finishing a couple of laps down with Mercedes, Tim Kay and Tom Track, your finishers in the race. Just the 10 of them reaching the checkered flag. Of course, Dylan Bacano had a retirement quite late on, but then we had all the other drivers retiring very, very early. Paulie Partonen, Ellis, Ray, Carrion, Malilo and Lemoyne all retiring after first lap issues here at Laguna Seca. It was a chaotic start to the race, but it was a thrilling race throughout, and Brantholm was put under pressure a lot more, particularly post pit stop.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, I said earlier on, it was going to come down to the pit stops in terms of the big swings. You know, the pace was similar enough, but we could have seen big changes in the pit stops. We didn't, because both of them nailed it. You know, both had good entries, both were right on the limit, and both had identical pit stop times and great exits as well. So in the actual fact, by the time they came out the pits, nothing much changed. And at that point, you know, it was still looking like it was going to be a good battle, but Fava just couldn't quite hold on to keep his car within the limits of the track, I should say. Yeah. And obviously that's resulted in the drive-through and a comfortable win. I just got to say as well, Justin Belillo, I'm gutted because, you know, he obviously retired on lap 1. A Traxion colleague of ours, one of the main editors on the Traxion website, would have loved to have seen him featuring in this race, but we missed his one and only lap, unfortunately, so that is a real shame.
It's just, again, you know, race starts around here, they can be tricky. It is quite tight on the grid as well on that run down to the first real corner. I do wonder, Riccardo Fava, do you reckon if potentially hadn't had that bit of lap traffic, of course, pitted a little bit earlier than Brantholm, had that little bit of lap traffic coming down into the Andretti hairpin, I think that if that wasn't the case, maybe would have been attacking a little bit more aggressively on the opening lap of that second stint?
Possibly. I think by that point it was already, the gap was going to be just over a second anyway. And to be honest, we did then see Fava get within a second on multiple occasions. So I don't think that really changed the race at all, in my opinion. I think every time Fava got within the second, he got in the dirty air, didn't quite manage to deal with it as well as he could have, from what I could see on the outside anyway. I'm sure he was, obviously he was trying very hard and doing a great job regardless, but he didn't quite manage to hook it up when he needed to. And every time he got within a second, we saw the missed apex, we saw the oversteer, we saw the overheating tyres, and he just dropped off a little bit. So he just didn't quite have enough in the end, but I'm sure he'd be delighted to take home that P2 trophy anyway.
I know that both us in the commentary booth, we'd definitely love to see you sat at home joining us in the on the grid for the next race of the season. I mean, the competition system on rFactor 2 is always growing, isn't it, John? It's kind of one of those things that's so easy for people to just jump into now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's one of the things that's lacked over the years for rFactor 2. We want accessible online racing where people that can maybe play an offline game and get into a sim, really enjoy the physics, can actually go on and race against other people in a very easy to use environment. And I think that's what the competition system brings. It basically takes rFactor 2 and puts it up with a lot of other sims that already have fantastic established online systems. And it's great, as you say, that you can sit at home, jump in a race, and you can be racing against some of the biggest names in all of sim racing and esports, by the click of a button. So well done on the implementation of the system. It definitely is coming into its own now.
Yeah, especially when you've got we've had the touring car challenge and stuff. We've obviously had the Alpines racing around, open wheelers and stuff, and then for this season coming up of the competition system, we've got the GT3 trophy. Of course, we don't have the rFactor 2 GT Pro series time because we're still very much in the swing of things in the rFactor 2 Formula Challenge and Formula Pro series at the moment, which the second half of the season will start in a few weeks' time. But from a GT3 point of view, we do have that GT3 trophy. It looks like it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every championship in rFactor 2 right now is so competitive, especially right at the top level. We're seeing many drivers crossing between the different series, and you're seeing a lot of the same names popping up. Hopefully, we'll see some names from Race of the Season also featuring at the front of that championship. But yeah, things are great at the moment. Esports on RF2 are in a fantastic position, probably the best they've ever been, and certainly the most competitive they've ever been. So plenty of racing action to look forward to.
There is no Formula Pro on tomorrow. Of course, we do typically associate Monday nights at the moment with our fantastic open wheel racing. But for the moment, there is no Formula Pro. It is on a mid-season break right now. The next time you'll see the open wheelers hitting the circuit, that'll be in Formula Challenge in a week's time as they'll head to Donington Park. Formula Pro will then follow the week after that, and that'll be the next bit of fantastic racing. From us here tonight, though, in Race of the Season 3, that is us done. My name's been Lewis McGlade. John Monroe has been alongside. But Race the Season will be back, and let's take a look at what's going to be raced next time as we wish you a very warm goodbye.